So let's get started for today. Some quick announcements. Portrait Studio is going to be on sale June 1st for 2 weeks. Starting June 1st, it's going to be on sale starting the 31st of May at midnight and going on for 2 weeks until the 14th. If there are stragglers, if someone's pay cycle is off, you just have to speak up and I'll extend the sale. I put the sale out there and it's going to be 50% off. For those who can't afford the current price, it's the same price throughout the year at $80 to $90 depending on updates and changes. So it's a little less than $100, and 50% off is a lot off. So if you can wait for the sale. Tell your friends, anybody who wants it, that it's going to be on sale and that they should wait if they don't want to pay the full price. I know you guys are students and you guys have budgets, and Portrait Studio is just amazing, so I want to make sure it's available for everyone if they need it. Another announcement is due June 20th, Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, is our community challenge. The current challenge, which I have pinned at the top of the Reddit. Let me go back to it. Summer 2019 Illustration Design Challenge. It is going to be an action-packed scene. You have to read through and download the resource pack. Ask any questions you have here. Showing your work is mandatory, so it's not optional. If you don't hand in your thumbnails, your mood boards, your references, I'm not taking a look at it, and it will not be added to the poll for the challenge winner. I'm still trying to find a good poll. Someone suggested one, which I have been looking at for community polls. But if you want to know what it's all about, just go here and download it. It's pinned at the top of the Reddit. If you haven't joined us on Reddit, please do. To navigate to it, just go to istebrak.com and click on the Reddit icon at the top right corner. To buy Portrait Studio when it's on sale, you just have to go to istebrak.com and click on the store icon. All my brushes will also be on sale. Any brush you've ever seen me use is available on my store. And it will be, I believe the pack will be at 20% or 50% off as well. So the bundle and Portrait Studio. And I think that's it. If you want to support me on Patreon, you want to give back to the community in exchange for educational material as well for the higher tiers, please support me on Patreon. My goal is 1,000 patrons. It's been a while since that goal's been up, but if everybody joined for $1, it would definitely keep this community alive. So if you can join as a patron, please do. If you can let your friends know to join as a patron, that would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. And that's it for announcements. Let's get started on the paintovers today. So one thing I wanted to start off with was a 14-day challenge submission, which I haven't looked at in a while. And the problem here with this piece is that you have different light sources pointing like at different times in the face, and it's looking patchy. It's hard to get past the head and get to the face, because the eyes, nose, and mouth should be the only thing that's going on in the face. Everywhere else should be negative space, but you've made it so that there's high contrast edges, kind of almost unblended blocks, different kinds of light sources, brighter than should be. I'm sorry, I'm a bit ill today. Brighter than should be bounce light around the nose. The eye shape is also a little bit symbolic, so I don't know what day this is in your 14-day challenge, but a lot of these problems are beginner problems that you should be ironing out as soon as possible before entering the next day. If you're not getting a thorough critique, you can't do a 14-day challenge. That's why 14-day challengers have to partner up. You have to get a critique for it. That's the point of it. It builds your respect for critique, builds your threshold, and thickens your skin. The fact that you're restarting a face every time adds to your mileage. It makes you a professional, and that specializes you in this field. You learn better brushwork, you learn faster ways, and you're teaching your brain to work faster and finish faster when it comes to work, so workflow improvement. If you're cheating yourself out of a successful 14-day challenge graduation, no one loses but you. So the ways to cheat out is to not get a critique, is to continue painting the same file from day 1 to day 14. If you do that, you are not doing the 14-day challenge. You are doing something else. You are working on one portrait for 14 days. That's not a 14-day challenge. You have to start fresh. You have to start new. each time. If you're not doing it, you know it, and God knows it. So make sure that you are starting over. And you have to be able to finish the 14 days. Don't quit. Don't quit out of it. The point of the challenge is that you are expediting your exposure to as much knowledge as possible, leaving behind as many mistakes as possible by performing the mistakes, by doing the mistakes. You are leaving them behind. You're getting past them. And if you're not looking at 14-day challenge critique hours I've posted in the past, if you're not getting a critique, if you're not giving critique, you're not going to get it. 14-day challenge is a commitment, and it's not just a casual thing to kill time with. It will change the way you draw. It will perfect the way you draw a face, and the face is the backbone of your portfolio. All character artists need to know how to draw a face. So please make sure that you guys are not cheating yourselves out of this. I need to go grab a nib real quick because this nib has been scratched to death, I think. Might still work, but we'll see. I am using a bamboo that is old, my backup driver. My backup bamboo, because my tablet, Huion, I need a new pen for it. Okay. So, the different areas where you have lighting problems. Okay, so take a look at this. This is Portrait Studio. This is the model, the basic model in Portrait Studio. And I want you, by pressing down on one, I'm moving my mouse, I want you to take a look at the nose shadows. Okay, so when we have a nose shadow like this, the nose is the most far-reaching part of the face, so it sticks out the most. That nose shadow, if it's in this position, we have this kind of lighting on the eyes and socket, and then we have this kind of lighting on the cheeks and jawbone and temple line. Look at where you have shadows here on the temple. The only way we get shadows like this is if the light is coming this way. Alright, so that's one new light source. So now we have two light sources. Then take a look at what you've done with the eye socket. So we need eyeshadow that sits right on top of the eyelids. Okay, so that's, now we're on three light sources. And then the cheeks being that dark, that high, we're probably looking at, well, let's just say it's three. You have three, 1, 2, 3 different light sources. 1, 2, 3 different light sources all across the face. And let's see where the neck shadow is. The neck shadow is halfway through the neck. So actually you have 4. When the shadow is halfway through. This may be, like something that can be excusable. People may forgive themselves for painting like this. Oh, I just need a general representation of the direction of the light. This isn't a general representation of anything. You have shadows where they don't belong. When you have a basic sphere in top-down light, only the lower half of that sphere is in shadow. And the head, at the end of the day, isn't a basic sphere. It's more than that. So where are you getting all of these light sources? So it could have been one study you did. You could have been guessing. You could have been doing a lot of guesswork. You're allowed to use minimal referencing in the 14-day challenge for one very good reason. You need to build a better library of what light sources actually do. So, another problem is your light environment. The background light is so bright that it's completely lifted all of your values way higher than they should be. So, I'm going to just select merge down and drag this down, and then I'm dragging the values here. God knows. So I'm dragging this down only on the midtones. So you may have refrained from adjusting the face. Well, look at the value ranges you're choosing from. You've got values here for highlights, values here for midtones, and values here for shadows. Your values should be small little jumps from each other because this is the same skin all around. It's like she changed skin complexion only in the shadows. Unless someone came in here and painted these this dark, if the skin is a consistent value and texture, it'll stay this consistent value in the value range. So we have to darken it based off what you're doing with your midtones, Your midtones is the starting reference point of going up into highlights or down into shadows. And these value, I have a lot of brain fog. These values here are way too separate from each other. So I'm going to get darken and get rid of these excessive highlights. I think you're kind of overdoing it with where you're placing them, bringing them down into midtones. And I'm getting lighting. And just raising these values up. Okay. And then I'll go back to the before and delete away where I do have necessary blacks. Black is necessary because it is representing deeper cavities across the face. Okay. And then the cheekbones up is where the highlights really start. Cheekbones down is where the shadows really start, that beard shadow that I talk about. And I don't know what this black, light, white, this whole pattern system here, what's with the bounce light? There is no need for that. There is no need for over-representing this bounce light. That's not what's going to differentiate the chin from the neck. The chin and the neck create a pocket. The only thing that you need to depend on to create this distinction is a shadow that is sharp and does not share value. This is a fundamental rule. You don't need to depend on the thin line and the outlining that bounce light allows you to do, that the bounce light invites you to do. So yet again, you cheat yourself back into depending on lines. You're not actually sculpting. So this excessive shadow that you had on the side, this is a line dependency. You still have that. This symbolic shape in the eye, this over shaping of the eye, and it's in like almost like an Egyptian style makeup, is a line dependency. You are still suffering from a very visible line dependence. So some artists are a bit more covert with it, and some are very beginner with it. And this is what you're dealing with. Sorry, I'm not used to this pen pressure just yet. Usually I have a lighter press. I raise my sensitivity, I lower my sensitivity because I have a hard hand. So Control C, going back to before I did all the lightening. And okay. So more even skin tone. Skin isn't made of silicone. It's made of a very suede-y, soft, fuzzy peach skin. It's not, and it's translucent. It's not going to look like it's covered in oil. If someone's face was covered in tons of oil, maybe they would have these extreme spikes in contrast as well as reflectivity. But skin isn't like this naturally. We're painting a more natural representation of it. So I'm deleting away where we have dark spots, wherever we have necessary contrast for focal points in portraits, which are going to be the eyes always. Wherever you have those, I am deleting so that we can retain the black. Okay. And then now is blending. So when we're dealing with female faces, we don't want to leave these big blocky edges around the brow bone. What that is saying about the female face is that it's not a female face. Female faces are more rounded. And though there are many varieties where we are right now in life, like we're, different kinds of races, different kinds of bone structures for females. When we paint along a standard, an average that people can, that you can summon for character design, where you have a readable female face. God, Wacom drivers are just like they're just a practical joke. This is one big block that you need to start including, the block that shoots upward out of the eye socket into the eyebrow. And whether you know it or not, there's an expression happening in the eye. Whenever the inner part of the eyebrows are higher than the arc of the eyebrow, there is an expression. So I'll need to Control Z, go back to the old layer, delete away whatever affected the eyes. Get the old eye shape back. Okay, so before, a little more surprise, a little more innocent, that needs to go. Neutral expression for 14-day challenges. You can do a separate 14-day challenge for expressions, or just a expression challenge, just painting the expressions till you get them all right. I've done numerous videos on this. I think there is technically, like, there's a problem right now with the way my viewers interact with my channel. I don't think people understand how many videos there are in the history. I don't know if people are taking advantage of the themes there, 14-day challenges, or even looking at old critiques. I literally give you all the answers that you need. Maybe I should dedicate a little bit more. Maybe I should create a playlist or something, but you guys should be able to search my video history and find exactly which video you need to get the knowledge in order to pull this challenge off successfully. This is another blending here that needs to happen. No sharp edges on a female face. Another thing that you're missing is, oh man, I don't feel well. Another thing that you're missing is the brow bone. You don't have one. So the brow bone exists outside of the eyebrow hair. The brow bone and the brow hair are completely two different things. If someone shaves your eyebrow hair off, you'll live. If someone shaves your eyebrow bone off, you'll die. So which one is the more functionally, brain fog, functionally important one? Obviously the brow bone. So I would rather see a brow bone than hair when looking at a 14-day challenge. If I see that you have a brow bone, look at the sculpting skill that it's representing. Look at the anatomy and proportion skill that it's representing. When you understand that whether or not there's an eyebrow hair, there is an elevation here, a dense elevation made of skeletal material that is catching the light. So you understand the general skeletal structure of the eye socket, making you look like a smarter artist. But when you don't have brow bones, you have only brow hair, and you have these long, elongated, horizontal eyes, it's telling me one thing. You don't think about bone structure. You haven't done enough form studies, and if you have, you haven't married form studies back into subject. You don't know what a core shadow is and where it really sits. So the problem is that students are still capable of drawing faces even though they don't know what a core shadow is. It's like fake it till you make it type of situation. But in art, that doesn't go a long way. That'll literally take you like 2 feet forward, and then you'll have to stop faking it. A core shadow weakness is very, very visible, because to know a core shadow is to know the nature of the surface area and its contours. To know a core shadow is to know where the light can go, as well as where it can't. So a brow bone missing a brow highlight means that cylinders are a alien species in your thinking at the moment. That's not acceptable. We have some blending here required for the inner part of the crease of the lower eyelid. It does not work like this. Okay. The crease here doesn't travel all the way towards the inner eye. It's only hardest and deepest when it is the fullest part of the eyebrow against the brow bone of the eye socket. You have no eye socket line at the moment. You're outlining. If you're not going to draw a textured illusion of lashes, don't outline. Yeah, it looks good, but only to a beginner. You want to surround yourself with a community that is better than you, so that you know what looks good and what doesn't. To a makeup artist, to a simple tattoo artist, that extra line looked good. But to illustrators, that line was unnecessary, because that line isn't there in the real world. We're trying to represent what is there. Again, you depended on the line. Excessive use of the waterline when the waterline doesn't do this. The waterline does not stay bright all the way around. It is not this thick and not this visible. It is only brightest at the farthest reaching part of the eyeball, catching some light because it is wet. And then you use another line, a line right under the lines of the, right above the water line. You don't need all these lines to make the eyes look realistic. There's only so much that you need to pull that off. Okay. And this excessive brightness everywhere, this contrast dependency, is another sign of line dependence. Look at how many mistakes you are capable of making with the 14-day challenge. Imagine that, 14 days in a row. 2 weeks out of 365 days, you'll improve more in these 2 weeks with this kind of pressure for performance, with this kind of efficient learning environment where you're not dealing with color or hair or detail. You're just trying to perfect how well you can draw just a face, and with a face, because everything happens on a face. Edges, trenches, pinches, elevation. Because you're doing all of this on the face, you'll be able to transfer all this knowledge everywhere else. Another thing you're doing is you don't have another component, anatomical functional component, which is the outside corner of the eyes. You have this very symbolic way of tying up the eyes on the sides. Eyes don't do this. Upper and lower eyelid don't meet with the waterline. They kind of have a little break. They do meet with an outer corner, and it's like a little mess, but here usually lashes cluster, and we don't see that corner as much. And then we're tying off the lower eyelid, and then we're going to blend it out because it's not as strong a crease. I'm literally listing out for you what you need to do to draw better. These aren't just passing critiques. This is the technical knowledge required to pull off a believable face. Do them, learn them, write them down. One thing I'm serious about is portraits. Radially climbing the elevation of the lower eyelid to be level with the elevation of the sphere of the eyeball, so that now we have a slow and gradual drop in value just down there. And then that really all-important eye socket that radially drops from black to white. 100% black. If you don't know what radial shading is, do a video history search on my channel. Really get to learn how to do a video history, so let's talk about it. Okay, so you go to my channel. Okay, you go to here and you write radial shading. Right, and I talk about it. Radial shading, radial shading. It's everywhere. I talk about it everywhere. Especially critique edge work here. This video is very, very important. Lots of 14-day challengers. And challenge, everything you need to know about the 14-day challenge. Where is it? There it is. This is from a year ago. Tons of 14-day challengers that I've looked at. And then you can just go to videos and scroll down for what you think is most relevant to what you're dealing with as you're painting. So what is it that you're dealing with? Just look through and you'll find it. Talked about it probably for an hour, most likely talked about it for an hour. So 100% black, low opacity. I'm building up my values as the trench happens, as the crease, as that little butt crack above the eyeball happens. That's what I'm building toward. And then for every shadow, there is a highlight. For every hill, there's a valley. Or for every valley, there's a hill. And I'm erasing radially. And just look at what we just created with a little bit of strategic layering. We've created a gradual emanating shadow emerging from that place in the eyebrow. And then there is a line there. There's really only a couple lines you can use. There's a line right here in the deepest part. If you have questions, make sure you @ Istebrak. If If you want to ask me any questions at the end of this, all 14-day challengers, all currently running 14-day challengers, show yourselves and ask away. You want this to be a successful graduation. Extension of the use of that line for the lash line. That's not what a lash line does. It does not extend all the way in unless it's makeup. And you don't want to be makeup dependent artists. That's the worst thing, because above all, you're not impressing yourself. You may feel the glory of getting compliments from being line dependent, possibly by anime fans or people who respond to that kind of art. But sooner or later, you're going to have to impress yourself, and that's the hardest person to impress. So don't cheat your way out of anatomy, out of functional anatomy, by depending too much on lines, by letting lines create that glamour that really at the end of the day is not a skill representation. It's just smoke and mirrors. That extension of that line, overuse of waterline, it doesn't feel like it's a real face. You need that inner corner here. Same thing on the other side. That inner corner is always bright because it's wet. It's actually bright skin. Makeup, it has influenced the way we look at that inner bright area. Some people have extra oils there. There's so many different reasons why this area stays bright that it's not enough reasons to keep it dark. And then now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. 1, 2, shrinking my brush with open and closed square brackets or whatever other keys you've assigned. And then finishing off with a line just on the highest part of the eyelid. And then erasing away with a hard edge brush. This is my marker brush. This is the one that I've been using recently. It's part of my sketch set, heavy marker sketch. It's amazing for cleaning up and amazing for blocking, but staying clean without any texture. And I'm just making sure I'm not accidentally getting rid of that brow bone. Look at that. You have a crease there now. And I said this before, the crease is what I look at when I judge an artist's skill, because a crease takes so much control, so much technique, so much finesse that it has to be a marriage of knowledge and technique, and that doesn't happen unless you've spent a lot of work drawing, a lot of time drawing, and that only happens when you've actually done the work. So that's why I judge the skill based off that. Even if they fucked up the mouth a little bit, or they messed up here and there, I don't care if the crease is done well. I know this artist is better than they seem at the moment, or very, very skilled, or very knowledgeable, or they have the knowledge where it should be in all the right places when it comes to radial shading and edge control and understanding the surface contours. So if you were to draw these longitude and latitude lines, these grid lines everywhere, you'd know they disappear into the crease, and that's why we care so much about the crease. And just a little bit of fat buildup there, bleeding down. So knowing the different kinds of eyes where fat buildup might go, that comes from working with reference. So if you want to take a 14-day challenge, work with reference for a little while, then another 14-day challenge, it's just, that's how you study. It's just an amazing way to study. It's efficient. It promotes mistake making. It focuses on the real things that define skill. You're depending way too much on this almost cartoony specular light. When it comes to the whites of the eyes, be careful not to overextend that lower shadow here. And when we get rid of that, what happens? The eyes look just like they're looking in such a wrong direction. They're not really looking forward. They're not looking at anything in particular. There's no focus. Your eyes that you're drawing are not functioning. They have no function to them. And you're using way too much dark around them. Again, another form of elusive, or what you think you've gotten away with, is another form of line dependency. Alright, so I'm just smudging. If you haven't started smudging, if you haven't started using smudge brush, merged with smudge tool on Photoshop, get to it. It's the equivalent of smudging with your hands or your smudger while sketching. It's a better way to reorganize value. It's not dependent on the alt color picker or eyedropper. Okay, so how do we make these eyes look a little bit more alert and focused? We're tilting the eyes upward. Okay, so there's less upper eyelid space. Instantly, she's just looking at us. All right, and then we're also crossing the eyes inward towards each other. So she looks like she's focused on one thing. The eyes try to feed the brain one image. You look in different directions, you see double vision. So focused vision is seeing one, and the eyes adjust and calibrate according. So without overusing this specular highlight, we made her look so much more alert, so much more beautiful at that as well. Again, I'm literally listing what it takes to draw a beautiful face, a perfect face, a face that works, a face that is hireable, a face that looks good in a portfolio. If you're not doing these things, then you are, all of these are based off fundamentals, and you are missing the respective fundamental of what it is that you're ignoring. The cheek area kind of feels sunken in. There's a lot of midtones around the cheek. You need to have more midtones than shadows everywhere. If you have more highlights and shadows than midtones, what do you have? Because nothing happens in highlights and shadows. There is no color. There is no object in white and dark. There is nothing there. They are of no spatial or textural value. It's just black, which is a black hole, and white, which is blinding. Nothing happens in black and white. Write that back. Everything happens in the grays, when things are not bright enough, but not too dark, but not too bright, that we can see value changes, edges, colors. All colors sit in the grays. Okay, and then I'm making sure that the top of the sphere is where all of our highlights are gradually building. You need to do some nose studies, homie. I think this is like the perfect example of artists kind of half in, half out of the beginner thing and not knowing where to go. But it's so obvious they're avoiding the real studies. This nose has all kinds of problems in the way you represent the core shadow of the nose. If you really did your form studies and you really did the rough work, and this is the piece that is a representative of what it looks like when you avoid the real homework. If you really did the real work, God's work, let's call it, which is form studies and all the good shit, you would know that the nose, that the geometric equivalent shape of the nose is the rectangular prism or the pyramid, and that core shadow is a direct response to the direction of the light source. So instead of creating an even cut of the area where the light source has become rejected, you made it bumpy. So again, you painted it like it was paint by numbers. You painted it like it was cell shading. Even the sides of the nostrils are shooting up because you're just obsessed with the two-dimensional definition of parameters. You're obsessed with the line still. And you probably thought you were pretty good. Maybe you had a little line dependency left behind. No, you have tons of it. And the only way to get rid of line dependency is to start respecting the edge. And the only way to start respecting the edge is to just religiously experience it every day. And that's with form studies, studies of the cube, diagram studies of what goes into like the inner mesh, and that topsoil grid on top of every form. Becoming familiar with the names of basic geometric shapes in mathematics, pyramids and spheres and cylinders. Knowing where all these cylinders live on the face. So look at the nose before. It did not represent a light source. It was just the shadow of a shadow of a shadow, the interpretation of an interpretation of an interpretation. It is so far removed, but it still has some leftover indication that this is generally where a shadow goes. But there is still no defined parameter here where you understand that the shadow started. also the amount of contrast you had, the difference you had between highlight and shadow around here. It looks like it's been painted in. It looks like a panda nose. The upper lip bounces back directly. It's not an outline that we need for the bounce light. It is a surface change. It is a diffusion of the core shadow. And if you don't know where the core shadow is, you don't know where bounce light is. Write that back. To know where the core shadow is, to know where the bounce light is. If you don't know where it is, where are you going to place it? And I'm just going to completely diffuse that. And if you feel like, hey, there isn't enough contrast, the nose looks like it's ghosted, the beginner would do this. If you think this is an exaggeration, it isn't. I've seen this before. All right, and they do those little, you know, what you did here. Okay, and then they'd bring in some bounce light. All right, let's bring this bounce light. Istebrak told us that this bounce light would work. I watched an Istebrak video once. I know where to place bounce light. Okay? I'm really putting you on the spot because these are unforgivable fundamental mistakes that are so readily available, both in references and in classes. And you really finished a face. I mean, I'm proud of you. You are so ready for the critiques like this one. And if it's not critiques like this one, maybe not everyone gets a critique from me for their 14-day challenge, but you can provide each other critiques. I upload this recording on YouTube for you to visit, so you know what you're missing and what you're not missing, what you need to do, what's left, what are the priorities, what is the most important thing about 14-day challenge. I get that it would be great to, get your 14-day challenge critique every single time from me. It's why it's part of my private tutoring to do that. But, I don't have the time to offer every single person a critique like this one. And offering this one to you guys is offering it to all of you. One of you guys is to offer it to all of you. Please make sure you are taking advantage of the kind of, content that I'm providing for free as well. And there's no dancing around anybody's feelings. You either have this knowledge or you don't. And all knowledge is wealth. So that radial, gradual shading towards the inner darkest area is what makes the nose read as a nose. There's only one area of the nose that needs to be dark, and that is the whole of the nose. Everything else is above surface. There's a little tiny curve here, a little curl catching the light. And this is a very generic nose. If you can look up references, go ahead. The whites in the eyes are too white. And I've talked a lot before about the problem with oversized pupils. I won't shrink them. Look up the video in the video history, write pupils, and you'll see it. So don't over outline. Yet again, another outline. Don't over outline the iris. It's not always outlined. It would look more professional leaving it partially outlined or outlined only at the top than over outlining it. Okay. And then when we bring our specular highlights in, and these are only the areas that really need highlight. These are the areas that are the most oily, the most shiny. Right on the top of the nose, just a little bit, it's too much. A little bit of oil on the sides, just branching out. Not an outline, because my brush is large. And this is another problem you're dealing with, whoever you are. Your brush is too small. A little bit of shine over here, just sitting on the top. Shine on the cheekbones, growing, piling up. 1, 2, 3. And then lots and lots of blending around the mouth. You don't need any detail around the mouth. You just need a good dark spot, a cylinder on another cylinder. And I've made a video about this as well. But now, as we can see, you don't have any of the concrete designated light and shadow areas of a mouth. It's a cylinder on another cylinder. These are the highlights that we need to pull that off. And then we blend in between them. So I try to teach in a way where if someone just popped into my class, they'd be able to follow along. I try not to teach with like fast track shortcuts or inside jokes type of style. If I am at one point running through something really quickly, feel free to ask me, mods, let me know. But you know, the quick description that I just did about the cylinder should be pretty obvious, but I'll match it with a diagram as well. You have one cylinder for the mouth, for the upper lip, one cylinder for the lower lip. Top down light would darken only one half of each cylinder, the lower half. You need to preserve these parameters. Take them and project them on any lip you draw, or else it won't look like lips. Because to know geometric anatomy, which is to know that the lips are, their base shape is a cylinder, is to know that you are promoting volume. You show volume by showing how that volume rejects or accepts light. It may be a complicated concept now, but we're all visual thinkers. We need to have some field experience so we can really appreciate what that means. And we're going back to these highlights and we are blending them out. The smudge brush I'm using is from my smudge set. Oops. Smudge, smudge, smudge. And smudging the inner highlight here. And you see how long I've delayed that specular light on the eyes? You see for how long I delayed it? And then now when I bring it in, I know it'll have some impact. And it's not going to be this massive highlight. She still looks like she's looking down, mostly because you're showing a lot of upper eyelid space. She still looks like she's looking down. But compared to where you were before, because the light's coming from top down this way, so that's typically where it would be. But if we were to lower this lower eyelid and raise this eye back up, so quickly sketching it in, that's when she'll start looking like she's looking up. But when we're looking up at someone, less upper eyelid is visible. Okay, so that's why she looks like she's still looking down. This is still too low. This is too much exposure. When someone's looking down, you know, their eyes are, we'll see a lot of upper eyelid because they're looking down. That's a perspective cue. And you used one for a front view facing face. And we don't always have perfect exposure at the top of the eyelid though. And some people do have deep set eyes, so that's why we don't squint the lower eyelid, and that's exactly what you did. That's why essentially she looks sleepy or disconnected, and even if I raise the pupils all the way up, it still wouldn't be the real fundamental fix. But raising the pupils up will help in a second. Okay, having a more clean. See how focused forward she looks? Compare it to this eye. This eye looks like it's looking down. This eye now looks like it's looking up. And that's for one core reason, that now we are showing the bottom part of the pupil. We're not over squinting. And we can leave this, if this is how her character is, if she's got those pretty Jessica Rabbit eyes, you know, half closed. Okay, so see the difference? So I'm going to Control Z before I did that. Just wanted to demonstrate it, but I don't have time to do the other eye. And I'm going to select all. Merge down, select all. See that squint? Before. Derpy eyes looking in a different direction, different light sources scattered all around the image, contrast dependency, line dependency, unaware of the expression that you're pulling off, symbolic eye shape, no radial shading or value drop around the nostrils. The nostrils are symbolic. You're faking your shading. You're fake shading. No more fake shading. And I was just being a bit too cautious with the background value of mine. I want to raise it. Just because we added those speculars. I want her value of her skin tone to be different. Now it looks like a 3D model when you fix that background value. Before. After. I get it, I need a good roasting early so I can course correct. Do you accept payment plans for your week-long private class? I have accepted payment plans before, yes. As well as the 2-week. To contact me about that, you do have to use the website. I don't really take queries on that in the middle of class. Any questions at all? If you have any questions, at Istebrak. Is it okay to take a short break from the 14-day challenge to do studies, or should I start over? The point, one big benefit of the 14-day challenge is that you're showing up to your canvas every day or every other day. It gets you into that work zone. It teaches you discipline. It's not about motivation or inspiration. Motivation or inspiration are a lazy man's excuse. Discipline is what you're really developing when you're repeatedly visiting the same failure over and over and over again until you succeed. And that's the one reason why you improve, is because of the mileage. Confidence with giving critiques. I want to give critiques, but I feel like I can't give much in the way of good advice yet. Even if you weren't an artist, you would still notice things. Helping an artist in any way it's wonderful, and it's part of what makes this community. This community is based off critique. Don't be shy of giving someone critique in my community and being worried about the backlash or arguing back. Anyone who argues back, anyone who fights back gets kicked out of the community. That's how it's always been. And my mods take care of that, and I take care of that. And even if it was a layman, even if it was someone who's never drawn a day in their life, they can still tell if a nose looks off, if the eyes look a little sharp, it looks like they've painted their face, do they have makeup on? These are some of the things that someone who's a non-artist would say about this. Kind of looks like she has a beard, is what they'd say. That should be a giveaway that your contrast is completely off. It looks like you have 2 different skin tones here. Like a dark-skinned girl who only painted her nose and cheeks and forehead. Because that should be a very, very big giveaway about, why that non-artist is reading this problem. So you, being an artist, you're more than capable of providing what you feel looks off, and you most likely are right. And a lot of people will have the same opinion. Never feel like your critique is not welcome. Especially for 14-day challengers, there doesn't seem to be enough of a strength in the confidence of 14-day challengers to critique each other, or in people to provide critiques for them because, oh, they're so much better than me, what could I say that they don't already know? Every professional still has skeletons in the closet with their interpretation of fundamentals, or their understanding of fundamentals that they're not admitting, that only a professional would pick up on. If possible, could you explain what the smudge brush does? So my brushes have been set up so that they scatter. They create a back and forth motion. They also have different distributions on the brushes. So some have a wider range, some have a closed range. But the biggest thing about them is that they scatter. They go in different directions. It's not just one dragging effect of a basic brush attached to smudge brush. So smudge brush attached to a basic brush will drag. Motherfucker. I hate Wacom. Will drag. So this is not smudging because you're just literally dragging until it looks better. And that I wouldn't say is a controlled blending. What I would want to do is recreate the exact feeling of using a smudge brush. So this is the scatter brush, and it does all of that work. That's 46, that's too high. The key to it is making sure you have low strength, because Photoshop is a little crazy. And that's what's going to create that smudged look. Couple brush strokes to create that smudge and blending that we get, leaving behind a believable texture. You're actually blending and creating a transition manually, instead of depending on Photoshop to drag until the cows come home so that you can get the similar, but not that similar. And it's just relocating the values instead of distributing them with a scatter effect. Look at how much work I have to put in pressing on the brush for using a regular brush to smudge. Where just one of these, maybe this guy's my favorite. He's like a tank. And what he does is he has a wider range. Sometimes I'll use that on top of the eye. And it gives me that haze for the lower eyelid that some artists have. Sometimes I use that on the mouth. And it just has like a surface blend, the kind of blend that I get if I just lightly tapped my finger on my sketch and on my pencil. It's wonderful for diffusing cast shadows, the tail end of a cast shadow. It gets fuzzier the further it gets. It's wonderful for creating hair texture. And it's all with smudging and blending. You can shrink it to get less of a radius, but you still get the same distribution. Where here, if you got that dragging brush and tried to pull off the same, you're just creating a blur at the same time as smudging, and it's just back and forth until you get that effect. You're literally just shaking it, and then you'll end up with the wrong kind of edge, where if you use the scatter brush, oops, too much strength. And you, oh yeah, you have to raise the strength on those dragging brushes, those basic brushes. You have more of a controlled movement that leaves behind a believable texture with less effort. It feels like a real hands-on smudging effect that you get with traditional. You're always left behind with a textbook texture. I mean, the sketchbook surface, the paper surface texture, or you're left behind with the texture of the smudge brush you used, or the thickness of your lead. And this is more of an accurate reorganization of your values than this, which feels way too sterile, way too, sorry to offend you, paint tool sigh. It's just too clean. Okay. So that's too much smudging. Tons and tons of smudging history here. Mostly because of those drags. Okay. Any more questions? A playlist would be awesome. I'll get on it. I think I did do a playlist for just getting started. I might do a 14-day challenge playlist for those who are interested. I think I did, but I'm not sure. I think my mods can make one. I'm not also sure about that. Any questions at all? Let me see what people have been saying. Does eyes need always the watery line? Yes, you need one, but don't paint it as if it is, because right now the eyes have a very big problem. There's no white in them, and it's just all a big mess, because to get rid of the lines you used, we're left with nothing. Your lines were doing all the work, and they weren't doing much work either. So what I need to do now is get that white of the eye back, erase all this unnecessary haze, erase at the waterline as well. Just designate where eyelid is and where white of the eye is. The waterline is not part of the white of the eye. It is part of the eyelid. So just know what you're comparing the white of that waterline to first. And if you're always drawing these bloodshot gray eyes and these oversized pupils, you're seeing less and less of the white of the eye, which makes characters look more realistic. So we've figured out where that white of the eye is, creating that shadow off the eyelids, eyelashes. And then now that I know what the white is, I can designate the appropriate value for that waterline, which is not supposed to be as white as the white of the eyes and not as dark as the lower eyelids. Something in between, and that's all you need. And just make sure it is brightest only where the waterline sits on the outermost, and it's still not that white. Okay. Same thing here. That excessive brownness, that blackness around the whites of the eyes has made the eyes look sickly, bloodshot, and difficult to create a relationship with your viewer. I can go through the videos and message the links so you can playlist it. That would be amazing, Finn. That would be actually amazing. How bright should the white of the eye be in comparison to the surrounding planes? Not that white, it doesn't glow. It's just a degree lighter than your midtone. Not as high, not as light as some of your highlights. So definitely not as light as the specular, because the specular is watery. It's a big pool of light. Because it's water, it's reflecting the true nature of the light source. Your highlights might end up doing that too, because we have pools of highlights and pools of water and oil just chilling. So we can't make the white of the eyes as bright as these areas, because then it looks like they're a light source. Our eyeballs don't glow. So it's just another gray. It's just a lighter region of gray, so lighter species of gray. And there's eyeballing. Eyeball it, you guys. I can't give you a specific value because every painting is different. Every light environment promotes different kinds of exposure. So make sure that it's relative to your surrounding, and always, always ask, what is my light environment? How bright does my room need to be? How bright, how sharp am I making these shadows? Etc., etc. Okay, you're painting by numbers. You're cell shading and you're still using the wrong values. You're not sculpting. If you don't know how to sculpt and keep a shape in proportionate value jumps across this spectrum, start using less complicated shapes than a face. Use a simple sphere. Make sure you can paint a sphere in good light environment with good background color and the appropriate representation of the core shadow. Good radial shading on the highlights and the shadows. Blending properly. Start adding complicated little cracks on the sphere. Maybe a bump, maybe a nose-shaped or eye socket-shaped cavity. Slowly you'll start reintroducing yourself to the face and marrying the concept of object with subject. Right now, form studies are an object. They are of no specific label or subject. I'm just adding a bit more oil with that brush to make the nose feel more shiny. Maybe a couple bumps here and there on the nose. Just wherever the nose has those little bumps on it. Thank you so much, Finn. Any more questions at all? I am new here, and you're doing such a wonderful job critiquing and giving back to a lot of young artists. Thank you so much. Welcome, Solid Snake. Good professional portrait at Michelle. You'll get some good reference images with good lighting. Google professional portrait. I want to start a 14-day challenge, but I don't have any good reference. You can use other artists and multiple references. Minimal referencing. The 14-day challenge is not a reference-based challenge. It is a challenge that reveals to you your current skill level, whether or not it's there. We need to see how much you struggled on day one for a good comparison with your 14-day, as well as what work you need to do as a list with whatever critique you're going to receive, a list of what your problems are. If you over-reference, what are you doing essentially? You're hiding how bad you are. You want to reveal how bad you are for your day one. All right, so no referencing for day one, minimal referencing for day two. Respond to your critiques. This is not a referencing challenge. It's a reference for your minimal referencing challenge that helps reveal your mistakes and target them head on. And that's it for today. I don't have time for another critique. I wanted to take a look at this one, but this is a staging and composition thing, where here we're kind of just focusing on the real grit behind the scenes of skill development and rendering. So maybe next time for Thursday I'll take a look at that piece. If you're interested in supporting me on Patreon, you can do so if you go to istebrak.com. All my brushes that you saw today are available on my store, as well as Portrait Studio. Click on the Reddit icon to join us on Reddit. Make sure you join and post your work. Be ready for critique. And if you want to join this challenge, please join it here. I'll set up a poll system for winners and for the last challenge as well. And for Patreon, you can join by clicking on Support Me on Patreon. All patrons of 20 plus or more subscription get access to our private Discord, where I'm hosting monthly challenges, monthly homework. And the current challenge is very similar to our previous one and our upcoming one. There's also alternative homework for beginners who feel like apprentice group. If you feel like the apprentice group is too advanced for you, I have homework for lower tier skill levels. It's not always about painting full illustrations. We never even got to full illustrations when I started with my Patreon last year. Really going in with apprentices. We started off with basic studies. We slowly evolved into illustrations, and all of those past assignments are still there in the history of my announcements text channel on Discord. So if you feel like you're not good enough yet, that's not how it works. Any skill level is welcome, and all of my classes, public or private or Patreon. And if you want information on private tutoring with me, there's always this tab right here. Community rules for the 14-day challenge can be found on this tab right here. Scroll down, and this is all the information you need to know about 14-day challenge. When I complete the playlist with the help of Finn, I'll be posting the playlist here as well as on my website. As well as on my YouTube page, so you guys can have a quick access to all of today's class, as well as past classes that have discussed the basics of the 14-day challenge. All my students should graduate from the 14-day challenge. So you should all, at one point or another, experience extensive, dedicated extensive time to the study of the portrait. Okay? We're all going to be judged based on our ability to draw a face. Every good artist has been able to draw a face. That's not up for debate. It's not for abstraction. In our field, you have to be able to complete a face and create a character with it. Alright guys, thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you guys on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Bye everyone.